out of love created that which is not God. And so if you're going to take God seriously, you've got to take seriously what God is doing. God is creating, has created. And so that's crucial. And then, so let's flip it the other side. If you're going to take the earth seriously, then you have to take seriously what it means to pay attention and attend to the textures and the reality of a world that we believe is created, a world that is good, even if it doesn't feel good all the time. That is to say, a bee sting doesn't feel good, but the bee is still good. A strong wind that would destroy a home isn't good, but the wind is good, and we need the wind. And so there's the reality of trying to make sense of a world that we do not control, but we have to, in a sense, bow to the beauty and the awesomeness of the gift. And so I would say, for me, to be a theologian is to be deeply ecologically aware. And to be deeply ecologically aware is to be turned toward the divine life. So that for me, these things are so woven together. And my hope is that I would love to see everybody, no matter what their field of endeavor, if you want to use the term eco, add eco. Eco dentist, eco plumber, eco theologian, add eco to everything.
I feel like I was in church, Brother Carew, just in talking with Professor Jennings, because I feel like there's some spiritual and mental healing that I'm getting as I'm listening to you. It's like it's kind of making me go back and accept the younger Thomas, who was the outdoors guy. I'm an outdoors person now, but who really was like that as a child. Lost it in the teens, tried to get cool, what happens to it. Welcome everyone to another great and fun episode of the Heartwood podcast. I'm your co-host, Dr. Thomas Rashard Easley, aka the Hip Hop Forester. And of course, I always say co, because you're going to see my friend Isaac Carew is right there, okay, keeps everything going well. And then, of course, our other brother, Benny the Lupo, busy today, so he couldn't join us, but that's all right. It may have been too much if you have four men on this, because the man I'm talking to today is going to take us somewhere even higher. That's right. And I'm not saying that just because he's here. He knows I mean that. Isaac knows I mean that. I'm talking about none other than Professor Willie Jennings. We're going to talk some about, of course, some of his work, because the last time he was on, we talked about his career, but we're going to talk about some of his work, some of what he's doing now. But I want to start this interview off first by asking my friend, how you doing, sir?
Wonderful. Couldn't be better.
I'm trying to be like you. See, that's it. Wonderful. Couldn't be better. And of course, y'all, he looks smooth too. So, I underdressed with this nice shirt on, and he has on the vest and everything, but that's all right, though. It's all right. Thank you, Professor, for being here with us. Professor Jennings is a professor in the School of Divinity at the great Yale University. Professor Jennings has worked at other institutions too, particularly at Duke University, and I'm based here in Raleigh, North Carolina, about 28 minutes from his, from his former employer. He did wonderful work there, even better work now at Yale. And Professor Jennings, I want to start by asking you a question, really more so from a Christian perspective, or I'm going to say from a church perspective. Okay. The question's like this. I have to kind of say it and then ask it. I have talked to a number of ministers, and I myself am an ordained minister as well as ordained deacon, that when we talk about seminary, and in particular, when we talk about schools of divinity, like the wonderful school that you're at, or the school that you also had, that you had prior at Duke, and a number of other places, I often hear people say something like this. I'm kind of paraphrasing. They don't really teach about God there. It's very intellectual. You learn about history and all this other stuff, but you don't really learn about God. The question I have is would you consider schools of divinity or seminary to be too intellectual? Or is that a place where people will, I know I got to watch how I say this, because I know I'm talking to the professor now too, also, who understands this, but because you can't learn about God. But what I'm just trying to get to is that, have you ever heard someone kind of characterize seminary and or schools of divinity like that? And so can you just tell me, if you have, do you know like where that comes from? And even, is it true? Is it over intellectualized there? That's the question.
That's a great question. So it's a common fear for so many people in the church in the wider Christian community, especially in this country, to be suspicious of theological education and suspicious of, in some ways, education itself. Now, there's two sources to that suspicion. One is a good source, one's not a good source. Let's start with the one that's not a good source. The not a good source is the anti-intellectualism that is a part of American society. And that goes way back. The suspicion of education as somehow an alienating reality, a problematic reality for people in terms of losing themselves and entering into a reality of deception. So there is that history of anti-intellectualism in America, in which people have made use of ignorance as a political tool to give people false ideas and to get them to do things that they want. And so there's a history of anti-intellectualism that sometimes drives that suspicion. So in that regard, that's the bad part. But there's another point of that suspicion, and that suspicion has to do with people, in a sense, using education to socially climb. And in that regard, and in some ways, to distance themselves from their people, their past, their cultures, their community, as a way of climbing the social and economic ladder in America. And so that's good suspicion that some people have had, that this person is going to go to school and they're going to act like they don't know us. They're going to go to school and they're going to become our enemy. They're going to go to school and they're not going to remember our own story. And so seminary education, divinity school education, theological education has been a part of that second suspicion, that people use this to social climb, to leave their peoples, and then turn around and, in a very derogatory way, look at their own people. So that history is there, but it's there for education holistically in America. Education, on the one hand, has been used to uplift, which is good, but education has also been used to get away and then to speak down toward one's own people. And so you have those two realities working, and it's sad because they sometimes feed off of each other. And so what that means is that there are many people who, especially within the Christian community, that in their mind, if their young people go to seminary or divinity school, and for your listeners, let me make that distinction because sometimes people don't understand. Seminary is normally the designation for a school that is freestanding, which means it's not tied to a college or a university. It's freestanding. It's a seminary. Divinity school is normally tied to a school that's connected to a college or a university. So Yale University Yale Divinity School is a part of Yale University. Duke Divinity School is part of Duke University, and so forth. A freestanding school like Princeton Theological Seminary is not tied, even though it has Princeton in its name, is not tied directly to a school. Union Theological Seminary in New York is not tied, and so it's a seminary. So all that's to say for your listeners, that for many people, the minute someone says, I'm going to get theological education, I'm going to seminary or divinity school, they get very nervous because they're not sure if we're going to lose this person and if this person is going to ever come back to us as one of our own.
Thank you for that answer. That I think I was about to ask. I was going to say a simple question. Like, do you think that is entrenched in fear? But I do know I know I can answer that and say yes. But what I was going is just thinking about. So I'm originally from Alabama, lived in North Carolina, came to Connecticut. And I noticed that after I guess, crossed that Mason-Dixon line, I felt, just for me, I felt like freedom kind of opened up in some weird way.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like every place above that, it's like you can almost like it's okay to think.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay. I know I'm not a person who swears a lot, like that, but it's like it's okay to swear. It's like there's a lot of acceptance in some ways. And then when I come back to Alabama or come back to North Carolina, it's like, ooh, you're doing too much. You lost, you tainted, you confused. There's so much stuff. And I'm like, no, actually, I think I probably know myself even more because and not that I'm about doing a lot of stuff. No, I'm not about that. I'm still a country guy, if you will. But I'm just like, it's good to be around people where, it's like if you can have a nuanced view about politics. You can
Hmm.
have a nuanced view even about things like, the EI or something like that. You can have that. So my next question is, do you feel that philosophy kind of stays in certain regions of our country, or is that just kind of like a countrywide thing? Because one of the things you said in particular, you said here, in America, the anti-intellectualism is a real thing. So that's why I'm asking, do you think it's more wide or is it more like a regional thing?
It's a wide thing, but what you described is often the case for people going off to college, whether they stay in the South, come to the North, go to the East, go to the Southeast. There is something about leaving a community and then going off to school, even if the going off is just down the street to a college, that does open up one's horizon and gives us one a sense of freedom, palpable freedom, that you can now think in ways that before you felt like there was some prohibition to it. There was some things keeping you from being able to do that, and so that is an exciting reality of an education that's being done right. It opens up possibilities of thinking that you hadn't thought before. Opens up a freedom to think new thoughts and to think in ways that maybe your community would have kind of said, I don't know, we don't talk that way, we don't think that way. So there's something beautiful about that. And if it works well, then the person who's experienced college and graduate school, they bring that freedom back to their communities if they're coming back. That is to say, they realize that the goal is not to turn to the communities and say, "You try to confine me, I'm through with y'all." The goal is to say, "No, I still love you. I'm still a part of you, and there's a freedom that I now understand is for you. So I come back here to offer that very same freedom." So let's give you a concrete example. So somebody goes and learns about the Bible, learns about the multiple textures of Scripture, learns about the complexity of it. That they come to a new freedom, a new understanding that this book didn't just drop from heaven. It's a composition made up of multiple books, and there's so much now that I can think with the Bible. And they come back home, and at first someone says, "Well, I don't know what Bible you talking about." What they start to realize, no, I'm giving you a greater level of freedom to live inside the Word of God than you had before. And so, if that education has been carried out in a beautiful way, then what you have is people who come back or move forward, and they share that freedom and how they bring other people into it. I mean, that's what we mean at the best by learning critical thinking. To have critical thinking doesn't mean you criticize everything. It means critical thinking means that you're able to add a new level of judgment and discernment that makes possible freedom in how one thinks through some issues. You don't feel confined that you got to think this way. Oh, there's other ways of looking at this.
Okay, hold about. Okay, see, okay. I thought I had my question, but I got a little choked up here because now I'm thinking about the reason why I got choked up, Professor, is because being a minister, I've experienced that, like what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
I've experienced people. I'm gonna say like this, feeling threatened by some, just by like a new idea, or really not even a new idea. It's just people just hadn't read. It's like it's
Right.
right there in the Bible. Uh, so are there any other let's say like specific character traits or actions that people, I think would be good for them to take, like if you're leaving your community, to go off to school, like as you say, even if it's down the street, if you're leaving your region to go get some type of a training, like is there just a way that people should either leave to come back to, and I know it's individual thing, I know, but just like is there some things in nature and character that people could probably use to kind of ease that fear when you come back, or usher yourself back into your community after you graduate and come back as a different or changed person?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I always say that you want to carry a couple of beautiful characteristics. One, you leave as an open person. So you're open to learning. And so you don't leave fearful that you're gonna lose yourself. You stay open to whatever you're going to learn. And so if the idea seems odd and strange and foreign, even threatening, you stay open to it. so that you can get a sense of what's being presented. And then second, I already said the word, but let's say it again. You go as a learner. You go because you want to learn. And to be a learner is the great gift of education. And so what you want to then do is you bring both those characteristics back to where you've come from. But they have been expanded now. They've kind of grown up. They become more mature. And that's what you want to impart to other people. Stay open and try to learn. Why? Because to be a creature in this world is to be always in the mode of discovery. The world is a mystery, and we want to be open to the reality of it being a mystery. And so if we do that, then we can start to see the beautiful, manifold reality of this world that God has created. I always tell my students that there are two mysteries that shape our lives. There's the mystery of God, and then there's the mystery that we are. And neither one of those mysteries can you master. You just have to hold on and embrace them. But you ain't trying to master them. But you stay open to what you're learning, because there's so much to learn. And if we could get people to remember that there's more to learn, we could solve a lot of problems.
My last question in this sphere, because this, look at that, Isaac smiling. You see, it's this fireworks are popping in my brain, man. Professor Jennings, this last question in this subject area before I change the subject. Then how do we address what it means to be an expert based on what you were saying, you know, the mystery of God, but the mystery that we are into. I wrote it down. Learning is a great gift of education. Being a learner is a great gift of education. But what, you know, but what about those of us, and I say us, not to minimize myself, but some would consider an expert. And I think people consider me. I don't say that out. I don't say that. But what do you know, like, can we address that? Like, what does that, how does that align with what you're saying, or push against it?
Well, you just answered your own question. So for somebody to say that a person is an expert is one thing, but it's another thing for somebody to call themselves an expert. And so what does that mean? It means that the point is not to be an expert. The point is to say, at this point in my journey, there's certain things I am learning, and I can impart what I'm learning. But I've never met, you know, I could say I've met a few people, but they've always been problematic. A few people who actually walk around this world thinking that they've mastered the knowledge that they're supposed to have, and will call themselves experts. I mean, this is part of the problem of the cult of the expert. That is to believe that I can't and you can't talk about various things because we're not experts. And so we have to leave it up to experts, like the economy, like economists. But a good economist is never going to say that they are an expert on the economy, because, you know, we know there ain't nothing known. But the reality of it is that the truth is that knowledge is always a journey. And where you are on that journey depends on what you are able to then say to other people in terms of what you're learning and what you are starting to grasp. So, I'll give you a perfect example. I would much prefer a doctor who walks into the room and says, I'm not sure about that, but let me go see if I can find out more about what you just asked me. Rather than the doctor says, well, I know everything there is about that. I get really nervous when a doctor who acts that way, because that doctor is going to make some mistakes. But a doctor who's willing to say, I'm learning. Now, here's what I know so far. I've been doing this for 15 years, and here are the, but this case stumped me because I've not seen this before. Now, you could call that doctor an expert, but that doctor isn't worried about being called an expert. That doctor is simply saying, I'm in the process of trying to understand something that I don't have mastery over. So the language of expert never really serves us well. You know, if you've ever had a really good plumber or a good barber or anything, they don't ever call themselves an expert. They say, okay, what's the problem? So let me try this tool for that. I don't know if that will work, but let's try that. And you know, and that's what you want. Now you can call them an expert, but you really haven't added anything to the conversation by using the term.
You use the right example because I've had the best barbers. Y'all even have one there in New Haven, Tony. That's my guy. Tony never called himself an expert. I had a brother here, Desmond Ellis. He never called himself an expert. And my new guy now, Ish Lamont, he never says, I'm an expert barber. He just like, hey, tell me what you need. And then I
Right.
tell him. And then when I get up and I'm like, bro, how'd you? And he just like, oh, you good with it? And then I go see an author or a professor, and it's like, come back during my office hours and have your questions more drawn out. And I'm just, I don't even like you right now. But yes, you're right. I mean, those are great examples. So then with that, I'd like to ask you the next thing, which is kind of leading us into the eco part of this, if you
Mm-hmm.
don't. But I gotta put something out there about me. So I am a forester, as you know, and
Yeah.
I love my industry.
Yeah.
But grew up a Christian. Grew up going to church.
Mm-hmm.
Technically my entire life. After I got into my late 20s,
Yeah.
I would go to different services, whether it was a Moravian service or an Episcopalian, service, and I would hear people say things like, I commune with God in the outdoors. I commune with God outside. Now, I'm not gonna lie to you. I'm 46, almost 47. 20 years ago, I was like, they talking about it. Better get back in that Bible. Now, I'm at the part of my journey now where I do enjoy getting outside. Matter of fact, I went outside and walked around barefoot before having this conversation. I do meditate outdoors, preferably, and that's even in the wintertime. I do feel like when I want to, what's the word? I think
Mm-hmm.
diffuse myself or calm down,
Yeah.
getting outdoors. And the reason why I'm saying that is because when I'm outdoors, Professor Jennings, I'm in prayer most
Yeah.
times. I'm walking around and we're talking to God. Like I have some headphones like now, and
Mm-hmm.
I'll be listening, but I'll be praying. I mean, my eyes will be open, but those who
Mm-hmm.
know me know like he's really in his own mind. So, or he's doing something. He's not just out here aimlessly walking. So my question is that is there a particular way that you think we should express doing activities in the outdoors, particularly for spiritual purposes that will connect with, I'm just going to say different beliefs. It doesn't just have to be Christian, just like different beliefs. Like, do you have if that's not clear, I can keep trying to explain it. I'm just trying to see a way of characterizing that for those who may not have gotten there yet or as we talked about fear, a lot of people are afraid to go outside. Like my mom don't like to go outside to even have a window open. And I'm like,
Right.
but mom, there's so much beauty out there. And when you were a child, you played outside. So I
Right.
just wanted to know, is that making sense what I'm asking?
Yeah, you make perfect sense. You're coming up against the difficulty that so many of us, especially in the Western world, have to face. And what is that difficulty? Many of us have been habituated to think of ourselves as always being indoors. And so in our minds, we think we are always indoors rather than imagining and understanding that we are really always outdoors. And the question is, are we going to align our lives with the actual truth of our existence, that we are outdoors? Now, what I might what I just said may be confusing to some of your listeners, given what I'm laying out here, but it's a question of perspective. If you think your life from outdoors in, then you understand that being inside, in a sense, is a temporary condition. The permanent reality is that I'm actually outdoors, which means to say the apartment I stay in, the house I stay in, what I understand is that is situated somewhere in the world, right? But if you live your life from indoors out, the way you've been taught to see is that actually my existence is here, and the outdoors is only a temporary reality for my existence. But I'm really just going from indoor space to indoor space. Now, why is that so? Why is that such a problem to think that way? It means that how we then think about our food is short circuited. How we think about air is short-circuited. How we think about water is short-circuited. Did a talk a couple weeks ago, and I told the audience, I said, there are so many people who actually think they own their own water. I said, I own my own. I said, you own your own water, really? So now where does that come from? Out of my sink. No. 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 That's not where it comes from. So the flows that move through their house, they actually think are centered in their house. So they don't understand. No, this water is flowing through your house. The air is flowing through your house. These things are flowing through your house. The food is flowing through your house. And so the problem we have to do, and here, let's put it in the form of a question, my dear brother. How do we re-educate people to realize that they actually live outdoors and to align their lives with that fact? Now, here's the thing that has to happen. So at that first level, we got to help realign their thinking. Okay, no, the house is a temporary situation. The outdoors is the permanent situation. So that's the first level of alignment. Now, but now let's come to the second level of alignment that you mentioned a moment ago. The other is this. When people think from inside outside, they reverse the context of their health. So they think their health, it comes from being inside. Sitting on the couch, watching TV, eating food, that's how I'm restoring myself. And so then when you say go outside, like, well, that's moving away from where I restore myself. Now, in point of fact, if you can get them to, but here's where if you get them to go outside and be outside for a while, then what starts to happen is, oh, wait a minute, no, actually, it's just the opposite. So, I did an experiment with some people, and I said, okay, when you watch TV, what's one of the things that you always have when you watch TV? You have a certain kind of background reality that literally places you outside while you're watching TV. The TV takes you outside, right? But what I'm trying to get you to understand is that if you go outside, you actually have the reality that the TV, in a sense, is copying. So go outside. But now, here's the thing about it. And here's, as we know, many people, like my daughters are scared to death of bugs. Bees, wasps, and I said, okay, they're not going to hurt you. But this is part of the re-education that has to happen. That if we can get people to go outside and sit for a while, they can start to face their constructed fears, right? The first level of constructed fear is the outside world, right? Bugs, insects. I have so many people tell me, I'm not going to go outside in Connecticut because you have Lyme disease. There's ticks out there. Ticks everywhere. Okay, there are ticks, but I don't think there's a gang of ticks waiting outside to get you. Let's go get them. But so we have to start at the first level. So okay, let's confront your first level of anxiety just over the bugs. Okay, so if I can get you to relax about the bugs, right? Just relax about the bugs. The bugs ain't here to get you. Then if I can get you to just sit quietly and listen to the birds, then you realize the birds are not a problem. In fact, the singing of the birds will do something for you. Then if I can get you just to sit and listen to the wind blowing through the leaves, the trees, and listen, look at the leaves move and then listen to the wind blowing through them, that's going to do something for you. So we have to start to, in a sense, re-educate the body for so many people to understand that this is really where the body comes to itself. Now, as you know, our foreparents knew this very well, especially if they were from the South, especially if they worked on farms, they're sharecroppers or they, pig cotton, any of that. They understand this very well. I always talk about my own parents. They were gardeners, and so in the cool of the day, and this is obviously before air conditioning, the house is too hot to be in the house in the evening, so you go out and you sit in those big old cast iron chairs, the iron chairs, and you sit you sit by your garden, and your butt's almost touching the ground, but your hands are on the grass, and you're sitting there, and maybe there's a grill and grilling something, but if not, the cool breeze blows across your face, and they will come to themselves in that position. But now, here's the thing we have to remember: for so many people, because they have been habituated to function as though their world is inside, all of this has to be reintroduced to them. And they have to come to an incredible realization that health is in the alignment with being outside. Now, here's one of the pushbacks we get for what we're talking about. There's a lot of people, especially in the academy, who call this, they will say this is a kind of romanticization of the outdoors. This is you romanticizing things. And I always say to them, I say, listen, nobody's saying that the outdoors is, it's like Cinderella, and or like Snow White, and the birds are singing and walking with you. But the reality of it is that even with its hostilities, even with the things that don't make you comfortable, there is something about being outside that is actually healing for you. But you can't get there unless you allow your body to reconnect with its realities. Now, in order to help people do this, sometimes you just have to remind them about their food. Even if your food was grown in a hydroponic situation, your food is still of the outside. It's still of the dirt, water, air, sun. It's of those realities. And so you need that to survive. And guess what? Your body needs that as well. So we have to start there to try to get people to see the importance of connection. And as we're moving along, especially given the kind of stress and anxiety and despair that is all around us, more people are understanding that if I'm going to stay sane, I got to go outside.
Thank you for that. Wow. Okay. Well, then this leads us into the question that you gave me, Mr. Carew. Do you want me to keep going, brother? With what you said? Yeah. Okay. Professor Jennings, I want to say I like the way that Isaac put it. He says he thinks that the arc of what we're talking about could be about your journey in becoming an eco-theologian.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so now I'd like to first ask you, is it okay to ask you to define that? What would you characterize or define as an eco-theologian?
That's I don't know if I would call myself an eco-theologian. I would call myself a theologian.
Okay.
But I would
Yes, sir.
But I would say that at this point, anybody who as a theologian or an intellectual, anybody who wants to take God seriously must take the earth seriously. And I want to say the opposite. Anybody who wants to take the earth seriously needs to take God seriously.
Please break that down. Please.
So let's start with the first one. If you're going to take God seriously, then you got to take the earth seriously. Why? Because the God who has been revealed, for those of us who are Christian, the God who's been revealed is the God who is the creator. And so the creation itself, as most, not only Christians, but you could say Muslims as well, and that the earth itself is graced. The earth itself is an act of gift and grace that we exist because God graciously, out of love, created that which is not God. And so if you're going to take God seriously, you've got to take seriously what God is doing. God is creating, has created. And so that's crucial. And then, so let's flip it the other side. If you're going to take the earth seriously, then you have to take seriously what it means to pay attention and attend to the textures and the reality of a world that we believe is created, a world that is good, even if it doesn't feel good all the time. That is to say, a bee sting doesn't feel good, but the bee is still good. A strong wind that would destroy a home isn't good, but the wind is good, and we need the wind. And so there's the reality of trying to make sense of a world that we do not control, but we have to, in a sense, bow to the beauty and the awesomeness of the gift. And so I would say, for me, to be a theologian is to be deeply ecologically aware. And to be deeply ecologically aware is to be turned toward the divine life. So that for me, these things are so woven together. And my hope is that I would love to see everybody, no matter what their field of endeavor, if you want to use the term eco, add eco. Eco dentist, eco plumber, eco theologian, add eco to everything. If that's going to mean that I will now start to take seriously the textures of my existence in the dirt. As way I like to put it is that we connect bone to dirt, all the way down to the dirt, all the way down to the bone. And so if we understand the significance of dirt, now I got some of my colleagues across the country, they're sick of me using the word dirt. They want me to use the word soil. Why don't you say soil instead of dirt? No, I want to stick with dirt because, dirt, there's no fight over this, but I prefer dirt. And the reason is because to use the term dirt rather than soil invites me to think first about its reality as opposed to its utility. See, when you say soil, sometimes that tends to people's minds to start talking about what's it for. Soil means it's. I'm thinking about its utility, and I'm okay with that. But I prefer to say, now I have some friends who have a different vision of what soil means, but I prefer to say dirt because dirt is the thing that you can't control. It's just there, but it's there as something that you have to recognize as a part of you. But that's a minor thing for your listeners. The important thing is connecting to the world that God has never ceased to love, which includes the human.
Connect into a world that God never ceased to love. Man, who's too many mic drops in this one? Okay. It's like that. Okay, all right. Professor Jennings, just you see me and Isaac both, we just cheesing, ear to ear, because it's a fun conversation, but where you are unpacking or opening to me things that have been so at odds. I would say in the Black community in particular, but I'm sure it's been at odds in other communities. But but we're all a Black, we're all part of the diaspora here, and just that I can see that whether I'm talking to someone in Jamaica or someone in Africa or someone in DC, and of course someone here, where there's this it's like they silo God from the planet, and I think that they silo us then from the dirt. Okay.
Right.
And so with that, I'd like to ask you then, what role do you see ministry playing in this particular moment as it relates to how we see the environment and our place in the environment?
Well, that's a great question. And I mean, that's the question we should all be inside of really deeply right now. And that is, ministry has to connect people to the earth and to one another through the earth. That's what we've got to do. And so what that means is it means connecting to the earth in terms of the necessary reciprocity of receiving and giving, as my dear friend Norman Wirsba talks about with his agrarian thought, that there's an ongoing receiving from the earth that we need to do in humility and respect, and then there's a giving that we have to do in return, of caring for, of not overworking, of attending to the quality of life of the dirt and of the earth itself. So there's that reality that ministry has to do. Ministry has to now step into that fully. And of course that means I'm so happy about gardening. I'm so thrilled that many churches are doing that. I'm also thrilled that many churches are understanding to capture in fresh ways all the practices of how to garden, how to care for, and I want that to expand to matters of real estate and development. But that's for another conversation. But I want that to expand into that. So that's the first thing that's got to happen. The second thing is what you mentioned earlier. We've got to have a form of realignment so that our spirituality comes back to the dirt. We should never, you said it earlier, we should never put the Bible into competition with the dirt, man. That don't make no sense. We can't put the Bible into competition with the dirt. Now, of course, in the Western world, it was put into competition because why? because the colonialists, when they came, they wanted to steal the dirt.
Yes.
And so what they did was they told so many native people, so many indigenous peoples, here's the Bible, this is the word of God. Ignore the dirt. And all the connections you have with the dirt, those are pagan. Forget all that. Just take this Bible. We will take the dirt and show you what to do with it. And so we've got to overcome that separation and stop turning the Bible against the dirt, which means the practices that align us with listening to how God heals and restores us through the dirt are in concert. They are collaborate with the Word of God. They're part of the Word of God, right? Now, what leads me to say that? And for you listeners, I want to make sure listeners get everything I'm about to say now. If you take away every word of Jesus that has an allusion to, an anecdote connected to, an acknowledgement of land, seed, plant, animal, you have no words of Jesus. You have no words of Jesus. Everything Jesus said was tied to the land. Everything Jesus said. So now, if everything Jesus said is tied to the land in order to teach you how to be a disciple of Jesus and to follow God, why in the world do we think that these things should be in competition? Jesus did not say anything that did not have to do with the land. You can't find, there's not one word. The sower, the seed and the sower, the pearl of great price. I mean, you go on and on. There's not one story. There's nothing in the Bible. Nothing. Now, we could just say, well, that's because he was in an agrarian context. That's true. But we're in an agrarian context because we're in the world. So that don't make any sense. Now, as I said, for most of your listeners, no one's ever pointed that out to them. It's like we take for granted the fact that this is where God took God's stand to teach us. They're in the dirt. This is, we take for granted that. And so this is so important for us in order to be able to move forward. We've got to understand that alignment with the dirt is for our salvation. It's for our healing. So there's the reciprocity in the giving and the receiving. There's the alignment that's necessary, right? And then the third thing that's crucial there is the building of a life together, aiming toward the future. As all, Brother Isaac knows this very well. I mean, as I always say, when we think about the future, the mistake we often make is we do a linear vision. We have a linear vision in our minds working about the future. The future's coming from out there. But anybody who's ever worked with the dirt will tell you, where does the future come from? The future comes from the ground up. When you start to see the seed, that's the future. It's coming this way. It's not that way. It's coming this way, which means it's inviting you to stay right there and enter the future. Stay right there and enter the future. And that's what we have to understand, that we build the future from the ground up. And there we also are refreshed and renewed by the Spirit of God right there.
I feel like I was in church, Brother Carew, just in talking with Professor Jennings, because I feel like there's some spiritual and mental healing that I'm getting as I'm listening to you. It's like it's kind of making me go back and accept the younger Thomas, who was the outdoors guy. I'm an outdoors person now, but who really was like that as a child. Lost it in the teens, tried to get cool. You know what happens to us. And then, years later, I realized I was already cool. You know what I'm saying? Let me be that Eagle Scout I was. Let me get back outside. I'm dope as is. Professor Jennings, okay, let me just check with Brother Carew. Brother Carew, you see he's technically answered every question that we had. Okay, Yeah. I need to ask you one other thing, and this is not a trick. I'm admitting for my own edification. In particular, like I said, I've been up and taking notes. Professor, I've been taking notes, okay? So you can't see it, I'm sorry. In this last answer, you said alignment with the dirt is for our, you said two things. You said our salvation. And then I felt like you were like, let me lean in a little bit deeper, Thomas, in case you didn't get, in our healing. What I wanted to ask you is there a bifurcation? Is there a separation of what salvation and healing are? And I'm just asking, I'm gonna ask two ways. A separation of what salvation and healing are, period, in spiritual terms. And then the second way is salvation and healing in environmental terms. And that's the last question that I have.
That's a great question. So we don't want to say a separation. We want to say, in a sense, a level of distinction. So in this regard, salvation has to do with right relation, right, with God and one another. So that's what we're, so when Jesus is talking, when he starts to draw all those allusions to so many things. I mean, the great, the sparrows are counted. The sparrows are not one sparrow falls without your Father knowing it. And how much more? It's to show the relation, the right relation that he's inviting people into. Fear not, the right relation, right? But then we're already there. We're already there with the reality of healing. Healing, the right relation, when it starts to be enacted, that's healing. When people start to recognize that here with my siblings, here in this world, I can come to myself in ways that I couldn't come to myself before. That's healing, right? And so, these things are not in competition. These things are not fighting against each other. All we're talking about is the levels at which God is calling us back toward the life of the creature that God intends for us to be. As I like to say, the big term that we use here in theological, but especially at this place, communion. And communion is not just community. It's really living together, listening to one another, hearing one another, sensing one another's needs inside that listening, and responding in justice and mercy. That's what we're doing. And as my colleague Billy Barber says, it is about the justice of God, so that people are not hungry, people are not homeless, people are not without health care, that we're responding. And that's what we're talking about here. And all of that has to do, man, with life in the dirt. As I've been pressing these days, we've got to think much more seriously about housing. Got to think much more seriously about real estate and housing. We got to think much more seriously about the shape of our communities. We can't just close our eyes and let them be as however the market says they're going to be, because people are dying. And people are dying at multiple levels. I mean, people are actually dying, but what's also is that we're creating people who are scared of their neighbors, scared of their shadow, who don't understand what it means to be human by the shape of their neighborhoods, man. And that's a horrible thing. It's like what you were saying earlier, and I mentioned as well. And you have people who live their whole lives going from their car to their house, back to their car, to their job, to the store, and that's it. That's a diminished life. You just don't know it. It's a diminished life. Car to the job, to the store, back to the car, back home, and repeat. Man, that's a horrible life. Man, I lived in California for a while, and I thought I got and this is no I'm not casting any kind of aspersions about life in California, but when I lived in California, I said, man, you spend half your life on the highway in the car, getting someplace. You got to plan. Okay, now I'm going to try to drive downtown to downtown LA. That's going to take me 7 hours. If I do this, okay, now, but that's a horrible way to live. I used to say all the time, I said, how can anybody spend their whole? I mean, there'll be times I was sitting on the highway. It's the world's biggest parking lot. A massive parking lot, moving 2 miles an hour, massive parking lot. I said, this is just not the way to live. And the sad part about it, those of you who know the history of the highway system in California, the history of public transportation, the car industry destroyed on purpose mass transit in Southern California because it wanted that highway system. At one point in time, LA was poised to have one of the best public transportation systems in the world. But the car companies systematically destroyed it. And but my whole point here is that, living in such a way that, as we talked about earlier, you're living inside to outside, creates terrible problems.
Mr. Carew, do you have anything else for the good professor?
I do. I think that going between here and School of the Environment, the rhetoric and how we talk about why we do what we do can be so different. And I keep coming back to what you were saying about saying that you're not an eco-theologian, that you're a theologian that is concerned with these things, just like anybody should be concerned with these things, no matter where you're at. And just thinking about the scale of the work we have to do, I completely agree with you 110%. And then in those solutions, it means, collaborating between, various, sectors, ways of life, ways of thinking. And I think that so much of the richness in what you've been talking about today isn't there at times in School of the Environment, where it's like, this is about healing, this is about transforming the way you think, this is about relationality. And I think a lot of mainstream environmentalism can go more into sort of the scientific and technical.
Yeah.
So how do you see the relationship between those two worlds moving forward? Like, what do you think would be helpful, or what needs to be done to sort of bring that enriching human aspect into more environmental conversations?
Yeah, that's a great question, but I tell you that the challenge is that, as you've already experienced, and I've heard this from so many others, not only students but faculty, not only at our School of the Environment but other places, they're squeezed on two sides. They're squeezed on one side by the managerial logic of the environment. How do we manage these resources? And that managerial logic isn't necessarily bad, but it's already limiting, right? It's already narrowing. And then on the other side, you're squeezed by, the scientific, in the sense of, I want to understand and master. And as Robin Wall Kimmer said, the idea that, I want to not only observe but control the very thing that's here. And so, in a sense, to touch the world is already being hampered by being squeezed by these two very powerful ways of thinking in the world. Ways of living too. And so what has to happen is that we have to somehow place right in the middle of that to, in a sense, stretch it open and then capture it in a different vision of the big why. Why? Why do you do this? Why do you want to do this? And that why can be answered by the managerial or the scientific. Because all we're going to get here is, on the managerial side, is I want to continue to maintain it. All we're going on the scientific side is I want to understand it. Those are great reasons, but that's not answering the why. The why question is, in a sense, what makes these questions, those small answers important. And that why question is because I'm a part of it. And what does it mean to be a part of it? It means that there's a reality, there's a depth of my life that I have to touch in order to be able to do those things well. But of course, here's the thing we always have to remember, and you know this very well. The modern university isn't built anymore for those big why questions. The modern university is built for the commodity question. What can be bought, what can be sold, and what can be transformed into a monetary advantage by what we're doing. And so we have to, in some ways, we have to press against the energy of the modern university to kind of pull it back into a different direction. But that means, in some ways you have to be prophetic in School of the Environments. And I talk to people all over the country about this. You gotta kind of show up in these places as a kind of prophet. And of course, you know what happens to prophets? They get shunned. They get, okay, because if you're in the managerial side, okay, that's lovely. But what is that? Okay, thank you for that. Okay, and on the scientific side, they just start laughing at you. Okay, what I got to do with anything? You know, now half of what we said today would be laughed out the room. What does that got to do with understanding, these processes of reproduction here in these plants, and how does that help us with soil erosion? I mean, what does that got to do with anything, anything important? And so what you have to do is you just have to be prophetic and continue to say these things are very important for not only what you do, but why you do it. Now, I do think that there are a growing number of people who are in school of the environments, in other kinds of academic settings, who realize that their work cannot happen in the way they want to see it happen until they start to take up some of these bigger questions. But, they're still in the minority. And, my colleagues now, they retired now, John Grimm and Mary Evelyn Tucker, who you know very well. John and Mary Evelyn, they tell you a story. I mean, for many years, and it's still the case, and I think they would say in many contexts, they've always had to fight against people trying to put them at the very margins of the environmental studies realities in the world. And so when they try to convene all these indigenous leaders and other leaders to talk about climate change and other matters, as you know, there's a whole group of environments like, who cares about that? That's just that's hocus pocus, heebie. That's hocus pocus. That's lighting candles and incense. Y'all go over there and do that. We're trying to do the hard work over here. But at the end of the day, we have to carry forward what we know at heart is healing for this world. And so, but you're asking the right question. My hope is that we can get more folks like you to come to the School of the Environment. And, but as everyone who's ever gone, since I've been here at Yale, every student has come back and told me the similar story that you just did. Every student. I'm over there, and they look at me like I got two heads. I mean, they're not. I'm start talking about, the alignment and, the earth speaking, all that. They're like, okay, yeah, okay. They go down the hallway. I think there's an indigenous studies course that does some of that. But here, we're talking about soil erosion. That's what we do here. We're not talking about all that, And so, when you realize that's also the case, right? In medicine, and it has been for many years, it's changed in recent years. And why did it change? Because there were some doctors and others who realized that as a part of the equation of understanding the human body in its specific biological and even its atomic realities, we have to understand what they would call spirituality. And so it's kind of seeped in that way, because they realized for the body to heal, it's more than just a question of understanding the biological operations. It's also understanding not just the psychological operations, understanding the spirituality of it all. And so there are more doctors now, some, in growing, who understand this. All right, my brothers, what a joy, what a joy, what a joy, what a joy, what a joy.
Good. Thank you. I don't think there's nothing left. Is there anything else that you would just want to add? I mean, you've taken us to church, to class,
I'm
home.
good. I'm good.
Okay, vacation. Okay, I feel like I went and got a physical right now. I mean, my goodness. I mean, it's just, you said so many great things, Professor. I just want to thank you. I knew we knew this was going to be great. I don't know if everybody else did, but I knew this was going to be great. But I know it's going to be this great. So I thank you for your time, but I also thank you for really just your willingness to explore these topics, the way that you did, and just being so open with us. And I really hope that I know that they will, but I just hope our listeners will do what I know I'm going to do, and what my brother is going to do is we're going to apply everything that you said. Yes, sir. Yeah, and I
know this man. This man's already applying. This man's doing great work.
Oh.
This man's doing great work. So I have every confidence in this brother.
You.
Every confidence.
See, Mr. Carew, I'm not the only one who believes in you. Ain't that something? Mm.
Very thankful, very thankful.
Yeah, I'm excited about the future for this one.
Same.
So
Well,
now, brother man, when you gonna swing back this way? I mean, you left Connecticut and we ain't seen your face since you left, huh?
no, I come back. No, I was just there 2 weeks ago. I come back at least once or
Okay.
twice a year since for the last 2 years to do exactly this, to record. The school still supports, like what we're doing. I'm thankful to have always, a friend. I could say it's friend first before student, but they support, having a student in the school, to work with us. But this has been the best that we've done these past year and 2 years, man. It's just been wild. But I will be back, Professor Jennings, specifically because you said that to me. So
Listen,
I will be back.
when you come back, don't show up here and not call me or nothing now.
I won't. Yes, sir.
All
I
right.
won't. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
And,
You better
and
believe
for,
it.
Amazing. Thank
and for
you.
everybody who's tuned in, this is another. No, this ain't another. This is a great one. I can't even compare this to the last one. This is an amazing interview talk with the one and only Professor Willie Jennings. Everybody look him up. I'm not going to give you his math and his contact. That ain't your business. You look him up and look up his scholarship. He's taught many classes. Like I said, he's told you California. I met him in North Carolina, and of course now they're in Connecticut. And everyone really heed his word, because I'm serious. I'm laughing with him, but it's because his spirit makes me jovial. But I'm serious when I say I felt healing in my conversation with him. Okay, and I'll close with it like this. I think that healing came because I know we both embrace outdoors, but we embrace each other.
Yeah.
And I think that key of what he said about not being afraid of the outdoors, not being afraid of each other, is a really key point that I think will save our planet. I think it will save our civilization and maybe even save our country. If we can it will save our country, because that's the thing that we have not seen. We've seen separation, violence, and isolation, but that coming together and staying together, I know it will save us when we do it. So I just want to thank you, Professor, again. Thank you, Brother Carew, for being there, for setting us up. We thank Brother Alupo, who's not here with us, and thank you, listeners, for tuning in to another episode of the Heartwood Podcast. Go in grace and go in peace. Hip Hop Forester Dr. Easley signing off. Until the next episode, take care.